I would like to call to order the October 2nd, 2023 Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session. Welcome, everyone. First up is the approval of the work session agenda, which you all have a copy before you. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda, including the changes on page 3?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And we move to discussion items. First up, from Active Living and Parks, comprehensive master plan presentation. I think Londa Strong's going to lead off on that one.
I'll just do the introduction and then we'll let the experts come in and talk about what's going to happen and how it's going to be done and when, and ask for your all's input, suggestions, or whatever. So with that, I get Lisa Wolf and Nikki Ginger. I almost said Grant. I don't know who Nikki Grant is, but that's right. And they're going to do the presentation. They're with Barry Dunn. They were the winning submittal out of 8 submissions. They were unanimous with everyone that was on our panel.
Hello everybody, my name is Nikki Ginger. I'm a senior consultant at Barry Dunn. I've been with the organization for about a year and a half. Prior to that, I was with the Chicago Park District for 13 years. Very excited to be part of the Cabarrus County Active Living Department Comprehensive Plan.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lisa Wolf. I, too, am a senior consultant with Barry Dunn. And Barry Dunn, to just give you a brief little history, is a national firm that basically we are in one of the practice groups, the Parks, Recreation, and Libraries practice group. So we bring quite a bit in depth in our bench when it comes to experience. We're all former practitioners in Parks and Recreation. Actually, I know Londa and Byron from our state association and lots of interaction at the different levels. I, too, am a retired Parks and Recreation Assistant Director from the city of Burlington. So I live in Burlington, just down the road a piece.
And so Londa and Brian asked us here today to kind of explain what it is that we're doing for you all. And so we're not going to spend hours and hours, only about 7 or 8 days on what we're going to talk about here. And so I hope you have lots of snacks with you. So we are here today to really, we're setting out to really look at a way to create a plan for you that's very inclusive, sustainable, and creates quality of life for everyone. And this was part of the RFP the purpose that Londa and Byron put into the RFP. And what that really means is we're planning for the future of Cabarrus County. That's what our role is here. Where are you going today? And by doing that, we need to make sure that we know where you are today and where you're going to go tomorrow. So our project team, you can see here, this is a representation of some of the individuals on our team. We decided when we were approaching this that we wanted to have kind of a national and local perspective. We thought that that was really important. And so I mentioned that I was with the Chicago Park District, so I'm up north in Chicago. And Barbara Heller, who's going to be here tomorrow, she wasn't able to join us today. She is the engagement manager who's going to be working very, very closely with both Lisa and I throughout this project. Barbara is located up in Boston. She has been in Parks and Recreation for 30 plus years. She is actually the individual who started our practice area with Barry Dunn. And then we also have representation from 5 other individuals who aren't able to be here today. But they're going to be doing things like the financial assessment and the DEI and operations and maintenance. And one thing that's really important, and I'll touch on this a little bit later too, is we have somebody on our team, J.R. Clanton, who's also a specialist in libraries, who's a former library practitioner, which we recognize that's having the libraries within your active living centers is something that's important to you all. In this group, you'll be doing a lot of work with both Lisa, our consultant, Bolton and Mank, who's the landscape architect, and they're going to be doing the analysis of all of the properties, looking at the land level of service. And then we're working with a company called ETC, and they're doing the statistically valid survey, which I'll tell you about in a little bit.
Great. So part of the interesting piece of this is that we want to make sure we understand the community that we're working in. I came down, probably about 2 or 3 months ago when this RFP came out, and I just drove down and went around and really visited the parks. Didn't meet up with any staff. We just did this on our own. So I wanted to make sure we understand the community, and being local, I kind of have a good feel for this area. I have family that resides in Mint Hill and north part of Charlotte, out near the Whitewater Rafting Center. So one of the things, right, I have a clicker, sorry.
I could do it.
I'm good. Is understanding the county. So we know basically where Cabarrus is. We know that you have a historically rich area in great land, both providing a really rural form as well as a local form of quality of life opportunities in the community. We know that the county is anchored by the city of Concord as the county seat, and which is where we are now today, and that you have some great relationships and partnerships with other surrounding towns and cities within the county. You know, Cabarrus County is certainly a dynamic community, growing as everything is around this area of Charlotte and Mecklenburg and Cabarrus County, and it's a welcoming community. So certainly, when I was out touring those facilities, it was beautiful to see what you have to offer so far in the community. We take a real county-centered approach. So as I said, it's important for us to know. So we bring to the table a complementary skill set from our experiences, both Nikki and I from the profession, formerly in the profession, as well as our other staff that you saw in those photos. And we provide an inclusive opportunity for this approach. We want to make sure we're touching every person in the county, or as many people within the county that we can. We know that the county has some sustainable practices in place, and we're going to continue to try to pursue those practices throughout the rest of this plan as we begin to develop that. The importance of gaining qualitative and quantitative data is highly of value for this plan. When we get into this presentation a little further, the quantitative piece will certainly come into play when Nikki explains the statistically valid survey. Qualitative is we're going to be meeting in communities throughout the county to really find out what their needs are within those individual communities when it comes to in relationship to the county. We know it needs to be a physically responsible plan. Sure, we could dream as high as we want, but we know that physical responsibility and making sure that it's a comprehensive and implementable plan for the staff in the county to follow through with is important. Sorry, I'm going and you're going. The planning for excellence, basically, how will this be basically provided and creatively guiding the future? So you can see the collaborative efforts, as I mentioned, will be meeting with all of ALP staff, other administrators here in the county, moving forward with other municipalities and towns. We're going to bring to the table real-world experience and then really provide that living document and make sure that it's an innovative and excellent document that meets the needs of the county. Next.
And this one, I'm going to interrupt you, I apologize. In this one, we thought we would get an interactive feedback from you, but then we recognized too that the internet connection for here wasn't working very well when we just tried to connect. So the question that we had inside of here is, what do you want to see? Is there anything that as you're looking toward us to plan for the future, is there anything that right now just is on the tip of your tongue? Is when you see us again at the end of the project, you also see us before that, but at the end of the project and you say this is success, is there something that you could share right now that you would say, yeah, this is what I really want to see?
I can't say that it's, the question arises. Over the past several years, I have been approached numerous times about cricket fields. And so I've not been really equipped to answer that question as to the availability of property or, if we have space available, those kind of things, but there's a growing population of folks in Cabarrus County that are very interested in cricket. So that would be one thing I would like to learn about.
Sure.
Great.
About how that could be integrated into our plans.
And that would certainly be something that would come out, we hope, in the engagement process either through the survey or through the interactive meetings that we have. And just to elaborate a little bit, I don't know if you know, but the town of Morrisville, outside of Raleigh, has a professional cricket field that does have many national tournaments there. So just as a reference point, moving forward, I'm
Yes.
completing an operations study for them right now, and that's part of their
Okay, and
process.
that has been mentioned in some of those conversations, what they have there.
Great.
What about something for older teenagers at skateboard parks? Keep 'em
Certainly
off
a high
the-
demand.
Keep them off the sidewalk and off the buildings. But I mean, there's nowhere around
Yeah,
for that activity to take place.
great.
Also, it's been a growing county, our school systems are growing in tremendous numbers. And there is a shortage of athletic fields, baseball, girls softball. There's never enough.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have a partnership with schools, right? Yeah, so you're looking, you guys work together and help to facilitate playgrounds and other amenities at the fields or with the schools. Okay.
Thank
And I
you.
think the partnerships with the municipalities, which you sort of alluded to earlier, would be really important. I've heard some discussion of skate parks from some of the municipalities, but I'm not sure where they are on that. If they decided to go forward, or if they're stalled, or, so I think, whatever we do that complements what the municipalities are doing is what's best overall for our citizens.
Yeah, and that's why it's important for us to be in those municipalities to have those conversations. As we go through, you'll see who we'll be meeting with, but just planning department, folks like that, and as well as the Parks and Recreation directors.
Yeah, and of course, we cannot have a conversation today without talking about pickleball I'm learning as well. So I'm sure that goes without saying.
That's right. Every meeting that I've been in, I don't know about Nikki nationwide, that's always a hot topic, so.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're meeting with Concord tomorrow, and Kannapolis, that will be out of town, the people that we need to talk to. And Harrisburg is doing their own master plan right now, and so we're very busy. So we're gonna try to get those two worked in sometime toward the beginning of the process. But we will have Concord tomorrow. And I believe they have groundbreaking tomorrow at Dorton on the phase, this is the first project of their bond. I think I saw that on,
I think they actually had it last week.
oh, was it last week?
Yeah,
I guess I was late to the show.
yeah. So don't go there looking for refreshments.
Change of the tour.
The one thing I think, maybe, I don't know, Nikki, if you want to elaborate, but our form of engagement is, we tried to be as innovative as we can. And so this was, as Nikki had said, the QR code basically is, and I don't know if any of you all have participated in a Menti survey with your phones. So typically you would just hold your phone up there and scan the barcode and the list of questions would come up. You can do it now if you want. But certainly is important to us moving forward, and really was important to the staff to make sure we were creative in our engagement.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, because when you do this, you'll see the other questions, that we had some other questions in here. And this is, we will always be looking for different ways to engage the public. We kind of end this with, we're park and recreation professionals. We're not, I guess by trade, we are technically consultants, but we really are park and rec professionals, and we like to have fun. So it's important to us to do things that are fun, so that we stay engaged too.
Well, let me just say, this first question on your Menti poll, what does the ideal future of Cabarrus County look like to you, is not something that I can type in between questions, Sally. And I'm not sure I can do that in 200 words or not, but I get the idea.
Yeah.
Wonderful,
Great.
thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the actual project and basically the 6 phases of the project approach. We've already been in the project planning stages. We've met with staff on numerous occasions to begin the planning process to set this day up, as well as a few engagement meetings for tomorrow, and then site tours on Wednesday. We'll take the information that we gather through all of that, as well as the survey and all the remaining engagement and pop-ups that we have yet to set up, to really begin the analysis process. And then once we get all that and the common themes begin to develop, we'll start that visioning process. And that visioning process is encompassed with staff, as well as probably the county manager and anyone else in those key leadership roles, to make sure we're all on track and making sure that, it's not anything that's completely out of reach from what the public is asking. And then develop those final plans and then the implementation process. So we talked a little bit about understanding the county, but this is the beginning of our engagement. So we basically will have these discovery session interviews, where we'll be talking one-on-one with some of the staff. We'll do a staff SWOT analysis survey for them to complete, to make sure we understand what page they're on in the process, and making sure they're aware of the process and want them to be engaged as much as possible, as well as understanding the community. So we'll participate in pop-up events, those listening and discovery sessions within the community, the survey, statistically valid survey, online engagement, and then just partner feedback within those other municipalities. Are you going to talk more about the survey? Okay. I didn't know if I should go that far into that. Okay, next. And so this little example here on the right was used in Pflugerville, Texas, on one of our projects. And basically what they did is the city got a trailer that they had available, and they just built this bulletin board, basically a black, big, giant chalkboard is what it is. And they brought that all around the community. So this is something that the staff might be interested in utilizing or designing to help that community and those touch points within the communities take place. So that's just one form of the engagement. So the city and town planning, as I mentioned earlier, the county partner interviews, other groups like the Ag Extension, 4-H, planning, other important folks, safety from the standpoint of the sheriff. We'd like to probably talk with him as well, or he or she. The creative engagement, this is the example of creative engagement. The community pop-ups at special events, so wherever there might be a special event, I think we have three community pop-ups where we'll be in town facilitating that. We'll also put together kind of a train the trainer toolbox for staff for any outside events that might not be within our scope, for them to be able to go out to the communities and meet with them, churches, HOAs, et cetera, and then the survey. And this is what I always like to call our wheel of engagement. So it might be a little difficult for you to read, but I guess you probably have it on your computers. So basically, the intercept surveys, pop-up events, on-site data collection is the first phase that we begin with the focus groups, public meetings, stakeholder interviews, key leader interviews, followed by the technology outreach. And that includes social media, working with the county department to really promote all of the information, from the statistically valid survey information to community meetings. Virtual meetings will be taking place as well, the online surveys, the interactive website tools, which is another really cool engagement process called Social Pinpoint. I think Nikki will talk about that in a minute.
Okay, so the statistically valid survey, what's important to this is that we recognize that there's 5 different communities, or five different cities and towns that are involved in Cabarrus County. And we want to make sure that we are able to hear from as many people as we possibly can. So we're working with a company called ETC. We've worked with them many times, and what they are going to be doing is sending out random surveys to random sampling of individuals. Their goal is to collect about 400 surveys, and that's what makes it statistically valid. When you get to a certain number, when you go over it, the information doesn't necessarily change. The trending doesn't change at all. We also recognize that you have a large Hispanic population, and so ETC is also making sure that it's going to be translated into Spanish. It can be done both online and via mail. And what we like about with ETC is over here on the right, you see this priority investment rating. What they do is they'll look at the feedback from what the community is asking for and where you have the gaps, which is going to allow you to identify where you should spend your money first. So we don't want to just come in here, everybody's going to be dreaming big and saying, I want 477,000 pickleball courts, or whatever it is. We want to make sure that there's an actual need and that you're able to prioritize it. So, for instance, in this example, this group can tell that really the number one thing that they need to focus on is trails and pathways. Other things that are listed in there, like disc golf, okay, they're interested in it, but it's already filled. Something that I think that's really important, and it's interesting, I think, Steve, you had said about pickleball courts. One thing that we want to make sure is that we don't want just one group of people being the voice for Cabarrus County. So what ETC does is they weight everything. So we've worked with the city that has, it's a very affluent city. On part of the one side of the city is extremely affluent, and they have very loud voices. On the other end of the city, they don't have time to complete surveys. They have less money. They're not as engaged. So what ETC does is they make sure that there's enough that the people that have all this time and money and passion aren't over speaking or over dominating the conversation for the people that don't have as much time. So it's a nice weighted system so that you make sure that you have a perspective from everybody. And I think the pickleballers is a really good example because they tend to be very passionate. The other item that we have that's going to complement this, and this is another QR code that you can see, this is called a social pinpoint. And this is a tool that anybody will be able to go out onto, and we can use a number of different items, plugins on this. On the right-hand side here, you can see this is an image of Gilbert, Arizona, and your residents can go in and they can identify things that they love about Cabarrus County. They can point out areas where things that they would like to have different. They could say, you know what, this area is great, but I want this. So you can see the exclamation points on there. Those are areas of concern. The hearts are places that we love, and we can choose what type of items that they're going to select. Or I'm sorry, that they'll be able to choose from. And you can have conversations with one another. On the lower left-hand corner here, you can see those little icons. Those are also customizable, and that's called an ideas wall. And it's basically a bunch of Post-its on a wall, and the users can go into the ideas wall, click on one of the suggestions, and read what other people have said. They can write their own suggestions, and they can up, down, or down vote the suggestion. So it really is a great way to get some more interactivity with everyone, and they can go out whenever they want to. It doesn't have to be at a pop-up event where we're going to, even though we're going to do our best to go to events that are very popular, you're just not going to get everybody. So this appeals to a different audience. We also, because it's QR code driven, you can have the QR codes everywhere. And while you're standing at line going to pick up a pizza or whatever, you can quickly do the social pinpoint. And then another component of it also is we can have a survey that complements the statistically valid survey on here. Now moving into the analysis phase, there's several different things that we're going to do. One is benchmarking Cabarrus County against other similar areas and different trends. Looking at your demographics, understanding what's happening today, and again, what's going to be happening in the future. Looking at your current systems and your parks and your amenities. One tool that we have is a tool called Placer AI, and what this does is it helps us identify mobile data use. And it helps us to see exactly what type of activity you have coming into your recreation centers, into the active living centers. And so this data doesn't have any type of personal data at all. It just helps us track to see what where activities is happening. This kind of data that you can't get from just regular registration data. So this allows us, without any personal information, it allows us to see what's exactly happening. Travel patterns, how they're coming in and out of the active living centers, how they're coming into the different green spaces. Oh, no, I did it. And our partners at Bolton and Make, they're going to be doing evaluating the existing conditions and level of service, looking at all of your GIS data and seeing where there might be some gaps doing a deep level evaluation. And then making sure that we have a full picture, we're going to be conducting the assessments on the organization, operations and maintenance, and recreation. I mentioned earlier about our colleague J.R. Clanton. He is a library expert, so he understands the differences between recreation and library, the little intricacies. Yeah, those that are important, and how they operate differently, and how to draw in and work and partner together better. Also, he's also our financial wizard, who is going to be looking at what your current spending is, what are some new opportunities, what type of granting or other funding sources can you be utilizing as you continue to grow. And then looking at the inside and the operational structure. Barbara is also an expert in how organizations are set up. Is there ways that you can do things differently? Just ways to become more and more efficient. And another part of this is having a separate strategic plan. So looking at your mission, vision, and values, looking at where do you want to be in the next 5 years? What type of guiding principles and best practices should you be focused on? And what type of, and prioritizing the recommendations for your future. And like I said, we also want to do this while we're having fun. So we want to make sure that when we come out to the community, when we're talking to you, when we are all working together, that we're actually having a good time doing so. And finally, here's just a very high-level overview of what the plan, what our timeline is. So we're starting here in October. You can see we're doing the kickoff. Londa mentioned that we're doing kickoff on Wednesday. We're also doing a tour. And then this next phase, we're going to be doing a lot of deep research into your previous plans, into all of your documentation, and then starting with launching off that social pinpoint site and the statistically valid survey, and again, doing all that deep dive. And we expect to be completed by this time next year. And I believe that is it. This was a follow-up for the other additional questions, but same piece. And what the one thing that we ask, or the one thing that you're probably going to ask is, okay, so you're doing all this stuff, but what's my role? Your role is just to help to promote it. Your role is to provide us feedback, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we could be doing differently. What do you really want? And promoting participation with your networks and your communities. Let them know how important this is. Encourage them to participate. Get out there and really get them excited about this. And I think now, if you have any questions for us.
Okay, commissioners, questions?
This question is probably more directed to our staff, but the current master plan that we're working on that is, I guess, set to expire in 2025, when was that?
It was in 15, it was another
In
10-year
15?
plan, yes.
Okay. And what were the recommendations from that we followed through with, or we did not?
Well,
or-
the park on the east side of town is one. That was an area that was identified as to where we didn't have a park. There's been a few things, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
It was not, it hadn't been enough money to follow
Okay.
recommendations.
And who did that? Is this the same?
It was Site Solutions,
Okay.
which is now Benish.
Okay. All right. Just curious that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Well, it sounds like an exciting process, and, you know, when we're talking about, the other thing that I didn't mention, that we had some discussion about when we talked about our St. Stephen's Park a few weeks ago, was a number of residents that have inquired about equestrian trails, and we talked about that a bit, so I'm sure that will be part of this study as well.
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, we thank you very much for being with us, and
Great.
we're
Thank you.
excited about the process and look forward to promoting it as much as we possibly can.
And we
Great.
wanted the viewing public to know what was going on and expect to see us or them or some of the folks at some of the events that are happening now. Fall's always a good time to have that, and be prepared to give us some feedback. We really want to know what you want.
Great, excellent.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, we move now to item 3.2, and we are happy to have Barbie Jones from the Chamber of Commerce to give us an update on the Edge Factor program. Welcome, Barbie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Morris, Commissioners, Mr. Downs, and Mr. Cook. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today to give you an update on Edge Factor. For those of you not familiar with it, it's a digital career development platform, has over 3,200 videos, interactive activities, lesson plans for educators, local community pages, and virtual reality experiences. Lauren, can you? Okay, Lauren's getting my slides up while we're doing that.
When did this program kick off? I was trying to
So it was
remember.
funded about a year ago. We launched it with the school systems in January. And so we've had, I'll go through and show you the rollout of how that's been from them, but it has been very, very well received by the educators that are using it. It took a while to get the data privacy sharing agreements worked out. The ADA compliance, for those I'll go, it is now available to all of Cabarrus County and Kannapolis City School students
Great.
for that. I'll go ahead and get started, and Lauren will catch up, which I guess is probably on our technology. So I want to start by the number 72. So 72%, the U.S. Census Bureau reports that 72% of Americans will live and work within 20 miles from where they were born and raised. So thinking about that, our students are our future workforce. So we need to make sure that they're aware of the huge array of careers that are available within their home community of Cabarrus County. When kids graduate, our best hope is that they will do one of three things. They'll enlist, they'll enroll, or they'll engage. They'll enlist in one of our fantastic military branches. They'll enroll to finish post-secondary work, or they'll finish some apprenticeships, credentialing, or they'll engage, where they are ready the Monday after graduating. They are ready to go to work. They're ready to, already have a job in place. They know where they're going for that. And studies are showing that career development needs to start earlier and earlier, as early as kindergarten. Now, we're not asking kindergartners, what do you want to be when you grow up? But what do you like to do? What are things that are interesting to you? What we have learned over the years is that if you don't show children all the different careers that are available, they are limiting themselves to those that they see around them. So by career exploration for a very, very long time, they're able to be able to start early in planning those careers and things that are necessary for it. Additionally, the North Carolina General Assembly just passed a law that requires seventh graders to have a career development plan in place. That plan has to be updated and developed in 10th grade. And while that's a great idea, there was no additional funding allocated for it. So that puts the onus on the instructors, the teachers, the administrators to make sure that that is taken care of. Through the county's generous investment in Edge Factor, each Cabarrus County and Kannapolis City student has a tool to make career exploration easier, and administrators can use it to help fulfill this new requirement. At the cost of $33,000 a year, that's about $1 a year for each student, which I think is a great value and investment for the county. At the Chamber, we work with businesses of all sizes. Every day we're in and out talking to them, and the number one concern is their workforce. It is the quantity, the quality, the soft skills. Do they have the skills that they need to be able to find employment here? So it's imperative that we make sure that our students that are coming out of school have an idea of what they want to do and the tools to be able to prepare them for that. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these slides on Edge Factor, but I hope that you will. But we've given some big detail on what we're currently doing with it. But to give you a background, prior to our commitment to Edge Factor, we looked at numerous career development platforms, but none was as robust, relatable, and customizable as Edge Factor. So it allows educators of all grades to be able to put together lesson plans, not only to explore careers, but to talk about important core competencies that every student needs. To give you an update where we are, we began the subscriptions, as I said, in January. Training started earlier than that. We actually started training last year in November. And we've met with educators, administrators, and key stakeholders to inform and train. Larissa Hoffman, who is the Vice President at Edge Factor, has trained educators in person and online. And she is actually based out of Canada, and she's been in Cabarrus County 4 times already. The companies, we've worked with 28 local companies to launch their pages as sort of a soft launch to make sure we're working all the bugs out of it. The platform is being updated by Edge Factor to make it more user-friendly. I'll be real honest right now, it isn't user-friendly from the business side. They are supposed to have it by November so that companies can go in and easily upload logos, videos, any of the opportunities that they offer to connect with students, such as job shadowing, apprenticeships, careers are available at their company, what their company culture, talk about who they are, and then ways that STEAM comes alive in the real world. And that should be able to roll out a little bit more at the end of October, early November. So here are the highlights that you can see the training that has been going on with each of the school systems and the different levels. We've started mostly with career technical education to start with, to roll it out. It is now available to all Cabarrus County and Kannapolis City schools. It is being taught specifically right now with middle schools and high schools, with the idea of rolling out to elementary schools later in the year or early next year, because obviously they're still building the pages for their curriculum. Next steps, you can see over the next few months, we're going to be doing a lot of training in person, always available to work with any of our educators online whenever they need anything additionally. Another thing that I wanted to bring up that I'm sure you're all aware with, last year Department of Public Instruction passed a portrait of a graduate. There were over 300 stakeholders, including the chamber, involved with this to put together what are the 7 core competencies that students need to be ready to go to work. A lot of these are called soft skills, living skills, durable skills, whatever you want to call it, but it is what most employers are seeing or missing in one or all. And it's adaptability, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, empathy, a learner's mindset, and personal responsibility. And DPI does offer curriculum that can be worked into teachers' platforms, but so does Edge Factor. And Edge Factor is actually working with our local folks to be able to specifically tailor classes around each of these core competencies. They already do this. They have several themes that run throughout their platform. It's embrace hope, don't give up, set goals, confidence is key, take risk, be adaptable, learn from failure, and build relationships. This is the Cabarrus Career Continuum that's been developed for Cabarrus County Schools. Kannapolis City Schools has one similar to this. Edge Factor is working to build specific pages around each of those checkoff points so that the teachers will have access to that for it. We have posters that are up in the schools, in the lunchrooms and teacher break areas to talk about Edge Factor. We have posters for students that are posted throughout the schools, along with postcards that have been given out to schools. And their theme is 1/3 of your life is spent working. Do something that you actually like, which I think we can all relate to. It's really important that we all find what we love to do. They also hold monthly webinars for any of the instructors that would like to get on and learn more. They do, like this month, they are having manufacturing days. This is manufacturing month. How can we draw attention to manufacturing careers, which we know are incredibly important here in Cabarrus County? Just to give you an idea of sample analytics, Kannapolis City Schools rolled this out at really the end of August. They have had between A.L. Brown and Kannapolis Middle about 50,000 impressions. Most of those are teachers, which means teachers are getting on and learning the platform so that they can share it. But I think for really about a month's usage, that's really, really good. We are excited to see this continue and to see where we go from here. Excited to be back next year and to get after a full year of use under the belt to see what those data points look like. Any questions?
What's been the feedback with some of the teachers, whether it's Cabarrus County Schools, Kannapolis City Schools, teachers or students? What kind of feedback have you received from them
So
who's
far,
used
I'm
this.
sorry. Yeah, so far we've heard great things. The students love it because it's gamified. You earn badges just like you do when you're playing a video game. It's relatable to them. It's more on their language, and it's not, so kids have seemed to love it. The teachers like the accessibility of it and being able to work it in. A good example is if you're teaching a STEM class, a math class on Pythagorean theorem, how many of us use that every day? Show of hands? So they actually take it in and show careers that you do use it every day. And so it's a nice way that teachers can use that aha moment to connect with kids. Thanks for asking.
So now, so I understand, you had mentioned in your presentation that, teachers can use this to build a lesson plan or as a resource.
Right.
So that's great. So whenever a student logs in, what exactly are they looking at? Or you had mentioned it's kind of like a game focused, I guess, to engage them to stay on the platform. But what is a student's experience
So
on
when
the
a
platform?
student goes on, it depends. Obviously, they're great. High school's going to have a different experience than middle school and grade school or elementary school. It'll get on and it'll be searching for, first of all, it takes you through what is your career interest? And then from there, it'll describe different careers. And there are, I think, 420 careers available on the platform. So students can get on and discover those. They actually have tours of the places where the folks work. It shows the skills that you need to do that. What do you need? What do you need to do to prepare for it? So it takes them through all of that. And at the end, they would have the option to see what's available in Cabarrus County.
Great.
If a business is interested in getting on this platform, how do they go? Do they just reach out to the chamber? or-
Absolutely. We'd be happy to work with anybody. It's not limited to chamber members, any business in Cabarrus County.
Yeah, I noticed you said 28 companies already had pages. Is that kind of where you expected to be at this point? I'm sure there are lots of other opportunities once word spreads
Sure.
and people have experiences.
No, we would love for it to be much larger than that. The problem is if you try to go in and set up your page, it's not very easy right now.
Right.
And that's what they're working to correct. I think once it's easier to do all your uploads yourself, it will have a lot more success. We aren't really pushing it to companies until that gets done because we don't want
Right.
them to be frustrated with the experience.
Excellent.
Just one comment. First off, thank you, Barbie, for being here. I appreciate
Always a pleasure.
the program that you have shown to us, the Edge Factor. I think it's just another tool in our belt to help students progress in their career locally. We've got the STEM programs now in the schools already, and of course, that teaches them a trade, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be here in Cabarrus County, whereas this particular program, by having 28 business already on board, that hopefully will increase that 72% to 90%.
We certainly
better.
hope so,
And
and
so-
that's the goal.
And when you tie this program in with our efforts as a board to direct our attentions toward economic development, bringing in the businesses, then, I think it's a win-win for everyone. And, but I think this was a 3-year program to start with, is that right?
It is started in January.
Yeah, and
We
so
have it
we're
for 3
finishing
years.
up the first year now. But I'll be excited to see the results in the near future of how well you did this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you as well, because I know that the school system has made a conscious effort in the last 8 to 10 years on CTE programs. And to me, this just goes hand in hand. And the more programs we have, the more successful all of our kids are going to be, so thank you.
I agree, Mr. Furr, and we do believe, this started out initially with CTE, but we think all students need it as a tool, too, for folks to get into CTE programs. What we are seeing nationally is where CTE used to be thought of as vocational rehab or vocation, it's now turned to part of academics. And it's really important that regardless of your outcome, you can really benefit from CTE programs all the way through.
Thank you very much for being with us, and I think that echo much of what's already been said, but, as we focus our attention on economic development and bringing new business and industry into the community, I think to be able to demonstrate to them how seriously we take through this program and other things, that we're trying to help with that issue that is listed on your slides as number one with most is getting a trained workforce. I think that companies that will see that we're investing these efforts in Cabarrus County is going to make us a much more attractive place for them to come. And I think it's going to make us a much more attractive place for our young people to want to stay here. So we very much appreciate the partnership with the Chamber in presenting this program.
Thank you. And what mother doesn't want their children to come back and live here?
Absolutely, correct.
Speak as a mom for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, we move now to item 3.3 from Infrastructure and Asset Management. Cabarrus County Library and Active Living Center at Afton Ridge Project Update. We're happy to have Kyle Billifer and Michael Miller for that item, and the next two that follow it.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So wanted to go through on the Afton Library and Active Living Center to kind of give you a pictorial update of what's been going on with the process and give you the last 30 days and the next, hopefully the next 30 days of the schedule. So that kind of gives you an aerial of the site, and just so that you're familiar with the different roads that are going through there, so you can see where our site is. And the next image will actually show the site plan and start of the, I'm trying to insert the pictures versus just give you a stack of photos like I normally do. So the image on the lower right shows you one of the first temporary stormwater control measures, or BMPs, putting in. Obviously, we don't have any stormwater going to it yet. That hasn't all been put in place, but that'll be temporary, and there's two of them on the site. There's one right on the corner, if you look at the lower left-hand side of that, and then the middle of the page. So the one that they already have dug out is in the middle of the page. And then the next image shows you the gravel driveway that's going into the site, and that's how they're accessing the site. So over the last 30 days, we've gone through several pre-construction meetings with both DEQ, or DENR, if you will, about stormwater, as well as Kannapolis. They've begun the installation of these erosion control measures, which that's that pond. And then we're also having weekly coordination meetings with both the county, the developer, and the contractor and the design team. But on the flip side of that, we're also having probably 2 or 3 meetings a week with just the design team in terms of buttoning up audio, visual, ITS, the last things that come in the project. So getting those all under scope. So the entire Cabarrus County team is engaged in that. And we're also having FF&E meetings with the design team, but that, obviously, we won't procure that furniture for some time, but we're going through everything all the way down to the actual material selections. That shows you the site plan of when the building is built, so if you can orient yourself, which is why I gave you the first screen of the aerial, that kind of shows you Glen Afton Boulevard and where the actual building will sit there on the corner. So you can see where the parking lot is actually where you have one of those stormwater control measures right now. So that's why I said it was temporary. But just to give you an idea, because as over the next couple months, when updates come in front of you, you're going to see pictures of footers and pads, and that's where the building is going, is on the left-hand side of that parcel. And then these are the different images. If you do go out to Afton Ridge and go shopping there, when you drive around, you'll notice that all the vegetation is still in place in the middle of the site. And what you'll notice is basically a running track taken down on the side. That's because all we've been allowed to do so far is put up all that erosion control. We have not been given full clearing yet. We've not been given that approval. These images take you through the stocking of your subgrade stormwater conveyance materials, so all your pipes and your risers. Should have taken that when the sun went down. It would have been a little bit better for you all with the glare. But this just shows you the clearing, so there's not much there to see, and this will be similar to how you all see it on the 17th during the groundbreaking. There hopefully will be a little bit more clearing, but I don't think much, just based on how the permits are coming in. So over the next 30 days, approval from DEQ to start full clearing and grading, and then work on site grading activities, and then what the first thing you would see after we clear the rest of the site would be that pad will get leveled down to subgrade level. So before the concrete would go in and all your footings, you would see that all balanced out. So that would be the next big thing as you drive by that you would see. Any questions?
Did I read correctly that's about a 41, what was the square footage on the building?
41,000.
41,000?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For the,
What's the
For-
hold, oh,
go ahead, go ahead.
what's the holdup on the permits?
You can't obtain certain permits without having certain traffic impact analysis done. And the traffic impact analysis study that was done for that entire park was done some time ago. And since then, there's been other amenities or other buildings added to that park, not by the county. So there's some holdup on how that's going to affect our in and out driveways of the complex. Okay, so the way that it goes, you can't get a zoning permit until they approve on all that traffic. So I can't put footers, I can't do anything in the ground until we get that zoning permit from Kannapolis. So currently, the developer is working with the city of Kannapolis. That's not a Cabarrus County activity as it's a P3 project.
The groundbreaking is Thursday afternoon?
The 17th, that is
17th?
correct, yes.
And this is going to be a tight site, as there is no on-site parking at the time. Where do you recommend that the parking be?
Well, it'll be in your invitation, that'll come from communications, but it's also on the first print, because I think I doubled up, I took it off. So if my laser works, yeah, no, doesn't work? Okay. So does anybody know where the old Steinmart is? Yeah, so if you come down and you know where Showmars is, yeah, please go to your right a little bit. In that swath of park, okay, go to your left. A little bit more. Yeah, where that hand is, that is the swath of parking in between the old Steinmart and the Showmars. And that is your clearest route in terms of both line of sight and just level sidewalks that'll take you right to the site. And then the actual groundbreaking will take place right off the sidewalk. But that will be in the invitation that you get from communications.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Exciting project, and we'll move on to the update of the next one at Mount Pleasant.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of walk you through the last 30 days there and the upcoming 30 days there, and then I'll go through some pictures. During the last 30 days, we started with mass grading of the entire site, tree removal and grubbing of the entire site. Contractors installed the erosion control measures and silt fence around the perimeter. A temporary sediment basin has been installed and approved by the NCDEQ. And they started working on the second sediment basin, which will be permanent. And the building was staked out and proof rolled to meet compaction. And the job site office trailer has been set up and in the process of getting utilities hooked up there. Over the next 30 days, the contractors will complete all the sediment basins and erosion control measures. They'll complete the building pad and subgrade. They'll deliver concrete reinforcing materials. They'll start the library foundations and layout and install the anchor bolts. They'll start layout and install the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing underground utilities for the library. They'll start underground stormwater piping for all the structures. They'll continue mass grading on the site and install the construction fencing along Washington Street to keep the public out. They'll set a pole and energize temporary power to the site, and they'll continue the submittal and procurement process for materials. So this next picture, as Kyle said, this is kind of a site plan with a couple pictures showing you where they're at on site. The top picture is the job site trailer, which is right there at the entrance onto the site. The picture on the right side is that temporary stormwater basin that's been built and approved. This is an aerial photo that the contractor, they used their drone to fly, I think Friday of last week, so it's pretty current. It shows the job site trailer up there on the lower right-hand corner. That's Washington Street going north to south. The building will be there kind of in the center of the picture where the dirt's sort of a lighter color. It's just a picture of the job site sign there. This is a sign that as soon as you walk onto the site, you see, and it's a safety notice that the contractor put up. They're pretty serious about job site safety, so anybody that comes on the site is going to walk right past this and have no excuse to know that you're supposed to have all your protective equipment on. That's another picture of the pond that's been installed. That's just a big shot of the entire site. Another shot of the site there, and that's the actual building pad where the library will be. There's a shot of some of that silt fence going around the outside of the site. This is more of that, right there along the property line at the very back of the site. This picture of some dirt that's being salvaged and stockpiled on site. Just another big picture of the site. These are some of the stormwater pipe that's been delivered and about to be installed. That's a picture of some trees coming down. It's hard to see from this distance. So, questions on that Mount Pleasant update?
Questions, commissioners? It's
Okay.
good to see dirt moving down there.
Yes, sir. The contractor is. We'll keep an eye on it too.
It's in their agreement, as it is with most of the contracts that we have. There's a general conditions for that.
They have actually got a wash bay set up for people to wash their tires off before they get back onto the street.
But if they didn't get caught, I'm sure that we would hear about it very quickly.
Now, aren't there some improvements planned for Washington Street? Do you know about that or a timeline for that?
I know that there's some water line improvements, and yes, along with some street improvements. I would not want, I think that would probably be a question for Aaron Burris and also the town manager, Randy Holloway. However, I can tell you that based on the last time I heard, the water line improvements will be completed about 2 months prior to us opening up the building. And I can let you know that to open up the building, we will need those water line.
Right.
Because we do not have the pressure for our fire sprinkler system, and we cannot open the building. So part of the permitting process required me to sign off on saying that we would not open the building to the public until we had the proper pressure.
Right.
The sidewalk project as well.
Yes.
Okay, other questions? Okay, we'll move to 3.5, courthouse expansion project update.
Okay, just going to give you the same information, last 30, next 30 type update for the courthouse, which, as you know, we're into the third phase of this project right now, which is the renovation of the 75 courthouse. So I'll start with the last 30 days. Contractors began work on the chiller redundancy project. They continued demolition of the exterior facade and interior slabs. They continue with construction of the new concrete and masonry shear walls inside the building. They've installed more temporary shoring for demolition processes. They've installed pipe and duct hangers for the plumbing and mechanical rough ends in the basement. They've completed underground plumbing work in the basement. They started the steel installation in the basement and first floor levels, and they began installation of the new wall track in the basement. And over the next 30 days, they'll continue most of that. So they'll be continuing a demo of interior and exterior parts of the building, continue steel erection, continue plumbing and mechanical hanger installs, continue pipe installation on the chiller redundancy project, and they'll continue to work on the new shear walls. So you got some pictures of that now too. This is a picture looking from the front of the historic courthouse along Union Street. You can see that they started to take down the exterior facade there. This is a closer shot of that same corner of the building. It's not really visible to the public because of the streetscape project going on now. This is a picture in the basement. I was telling you, all those things hanging from the ceiling are the hangers where the new ducts and new pipes will go. This is one of the shear walls I was talking about. So they tile this rebar up, and then they stick a form up on the outside of that and fill the void with concrete. And they'll strip the forms off and have a new shear wall there. This is a picture of it was an old fresh air intake shaft that went from the basement of the courthouse all the way to the top floor. And that's no longer needed, so the shaft walls were torn out, and those holes through the floor will be patched in. That's what those two beams are there for. They'll pour new floor across that on all 3 floors. This is a picture of the first floor. The daylight you can see is where the outside of the building was torn off. I showed you in the first picture. And this is the shoring that's holding up the floor now.
Should it be important to note that that's going to be the corridor that will take you from the
Right.
2023 courthouse through the 1975 courthouse and put you into the other part of the clerk of courts, so that you can understand what you're looking at as you walk around. So that'll encompass kind of the plaza where the Articles of Freedom are, and then that side and rear of the historic courthouse.
You can see the historic courthouse there to the right of the picture. But all that shoring will be replaced with structural steel. There's some more shoring in the basement that's now holding the first floor up until those shear walls are finished. You can also see that they've stuck the building with sheetrock in the basement, so they're about to start framing walls. That's that same side of the building Kyle was talking about right there. This is the 3rd floor. It's all demoed out now, wide open. It's also the 3rd floor, actually looking towards Union Street. It's more of the 3rd floor. They're working on those CMU shear walls on the, I guess, top side of that picture. So, questions on that?
There's no questions. I just wanted to remind, back in October and November is when this GMP came up to the board for approval, and obviously there was some significant value engineering, and as you start to see these pictures that Michael presents, keep in mind some of the exterior facade will not match the 2023 courthouse based on the value engineering that we did. So the sunshades were removed because we can come back in the future and put those in place, and as well as some of the hardscape was changed to more of a softscape. So it will have a different feel than the other sides of the courthouse as it's put together. And I thought one other question that might come up is, how does it tie into the streetscaping for the city of Concord? So our limits of construction end at the old planters that were on Union Street. So the old brick planters that went right there along with the stairwell that came down from the front entrance of the courthouse, that's where our limits of construction stop. So we're not responsible for any of that sidewalk, and the agreement that we have with the city is, because obviously we're gonna have a lot of equipment driving on it and crushing up the sidewalk that's there, is we will leave it structurally sound in a base, and then they will come back over it and cover it to make it match the rest of the facade they're using for the streetscape.
But the planters go away completely.
Gone.
Planters are
Yeah,
gone.
Gone, not going, gone.
Right. Well, I think that we have had significant conversation about this project over a long period of time. You have supplied us with lots of plans and discussion about it, but there is no way that I could conceive of the scope that you can see in these photographs when I stood there and looked at it in person while they were working all day on Saturday, by the way. But it's, I just sort of looked in amazement and thought, wow, this is more than I realized. But I'm also impressed with the impact it's having on the view of the plaza and the historic courthouse and those things that I know that we've talked a lot about. I think it's going to turn out nicely. And the one question that I couldn't quite figure out was the portion of the roof that's missing over that corner, which was clearly displayed in those photographs. gets covered back up, right?
Yes. New roof.
Is that not the water?
And that's not
Yes,
the water
yeah,
slide.
it's all going back, it's all getting storefront, so yes, the roof goes
Yeah.
back there.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we move to item 3.6. We're happy to have Chad Von Cannon from the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County for an update on the expansion there. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, members of the board. It's been a directive of Mr. Shu and other members of the Wasatch Board for us to communicate with our community partners and community leaders at any opportunities that we have about the expansions going on at the plant, plans for the future for wastewater treatment capacity, and the challenges that we faced as a community over the last several years with capacity being more of an issue and more in the news than it really has been in many, many decades. So I wanted to take the opportunity to come today and give a pretty quick presentation, but obviously recognizing that at any time, any questions that you have, please jump in here, because this obviously could be a discussion or a presentation that could last for an hour if we really wanted to go through all of this information. So please jump in at any time. So I want to start real quick with giving some quick information on the background of Rocky River Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. The plant was built in the late 70s as a partnership between the City of Concord, Cabarrus County, and Cannon Mills. It was primarily funded through grants, federal grants, about 75% funded through federal grants. The remainder was funded by the county, City of Concord, and Cannon Mills. It was built at that time as a 24 million gallon a day wastewater treatment plant, and about half that flow being treated at that plant the day it opened was from Cannon Mills, from their plants. In the early 2000s, the plant received quite a few upgrades. There was actually designs in place, approved. We were within 6 months of bidding the plant to expand the plant at that time in the early 2000s. That's when word started coming out about the textile Cannon Mill, Pilatex at that time, cutting back and then ultimately closing down. That resulted in a dramatic decrease in the flow at Rocky River, and that upgrades were put on hold, or the expansion was put on hold, but there were some upgrades that were needed at that time that were done. Later in 2012, there was a paper re-rating done to the plant, basically meaning we had them come in and model the plant, look at what it could actually do, and basically it was justified to the state that we could actually treat 26.5 million gallons a day instead of 24 million gallons a day. So that was a paper re-rating expansion that took place in 2012. 2018, we noticed a dramatic increase in two things. One being the number of projects that were coming to our communities and to Wasatch requesting approval. Second being our actual flows at the plant. As many of you may remember, that was about the time period our weather pattern dramatically shifted. We've been in a period now of about 6 years of years that are always at least above average, if not dramatically above average from rainfall. Unfortunately, all that rain always ends up finding some of its way to the sewer and increases our flows at the plant. But once we saw that, we noticed, like, all right, this is, and there'll be a chart here to show you kind of what we saw, that we need to start looking into this. What's going on? Because as of 2027, our numbers told us we had 26 years of capacity available. If you graphed out and you looked at what our average annual growth rate was from a wastewater flow standpoint and the amount of capacity we had about 26 years of capacity available to the community. And as you'll see, that changed dramatically. 2019 is when we began the expansion efforts with a preliminary design to really get an idea of what's this going to cost, how long is this going to take to build, what we're looking at here from an expansion standpoint. To give you a quick idea on capacity, because that's been a big issue in our community for quite a while. The state has a very rigorous process they have us follow to ensure that or an attempt to ensure you don't have wastewater treatment plants that are trying to treat more wastewater than they have the ability to treat to protect the resources in our state. So what we do is we take a look at our average calendar year flow for the previous year, our average flow for the year. Plus, we look at what capacity has been allocated to projects. So we call this developer controlled capacity. This is capacity that's allocated, that is there, ready for commercial, industrial, residential developers to utilize. That gives you a total of what's your actual capacity that's being used at that time. You take your permitted capacity and you subtract that, and that gives you your remaining capacity available to be allocated to future projects. So as you can see here, if your average annual flow goes up, i.e. rain, growth, everything else, plus your amount of developer control capacity increases, then your capacity can get used up at a quick rate if those come at the same time. So what I've got here is a quick chart that we'll move through, but the top line of these numbers here, you will see in 2017, our average annual flow at Rocky River was just a little over 16 million gallons a day. That went to 17 in 2018. We were kind of growing about 500,000 gallons a year. That we jumped 3 million gallons a day in actual flow in 2019. 2019 for Cabarrus County is the third wettest year on record. Rainfall wise, our annual average rainfall is mid-40s. We were about 68 inches that year, so about 50% more rainfall than average. So that was what, if you look at the bottom line in this chart, we went from almost 8 MGD of available capacity to allocate projects. We dropped down to 4.65 in 1 year. So we saw over 3 MGD of capacity available for future projects go away in 1 year. And a majority of that was rainfall, was in what we call I&I, inflow and infiltration, getting into the sewer. That's where we began the study of what are we going to do moving forward. And we started that. We had the feeling, though, you had the 1 year of extremely high rainfall, flow really popped up. You can always have the next year below average rainfall, and we kind of returned to normal. But what you see from these numbers as we move through is flows have stayed up from that point. The jurisdictional controlled capacity, the capacities available for future project has stayed at a lower level. I would like to point out the third line down, which is the developer controlled capacity number. This historically has ran from Wasatch being around 1 million gallons a day to about 1.6 million gallons a day of capacity that has been allocated to projects that developers have to use. It's theirs in hand to be built. That went from 1.6 MGD in 2017 to 3.18 currently, okay? So we have two things that have really worked against this capacity. One is wet weather that has really increased rainfall. Two is actual growth. Obviously, we've obviously grown in our community. But the third being developers have a lot of capacity in their hand right now that's just not getting used. The homes are not getting built at the rate they're getting accepted for new projects. So we are, over the last 3 years, have roughly approved 2 homes for every one that's been built. Is a good way to think about it. Those are good rough numbers. So I want to point that out, and along with this, that while we've had capacity concerns, there is still over 2 million gallons of capacity available right now to be allocated to projects. So we're not shut down. But there's a lot that could be built that already these developers have in their hands and could build at this time. Some of this is commercial, some of it's industrial, but the majority of this is residential capacity that's available. So where are we in the expansion? So phase 3 of our expansion began in 2022. Actual construction began in 2022. We are on pace to complete that in late summer of next year, so in about 9-10 months from now. It's about a $100 million project, just a little over $100 million. And this will take capacity from 26.5 million gallons a day to 30 million gallons a day. And again, that will be completed within about 9 to 10 months from now. Phase 4 is currently finalizing kind of the design phase. We've actually signed the first GMP for early procurement of some equipment for this project to get some of the long lead time electrical gear started, headed this way, and through that, some of it has over a 2-year lead time. But this will increase capacity to 34 million gallons a day at a cost of about $150 million. And this project is scheduled to be completed in early 2027. So these two projects will result in a significant amount of additional capacity for Cabarrus County. We know, as we discuss in here, we live in a great community, a lot of people want to be in, so we know growth is going to probably continue. So, well, one quick thing I want to discuss on the flow factor reduction. That's probably something that most of you have heard of at some point in time that we've been through over the last couple of years. We did work with the state in 2021 to have the number that we have to use to calculate for future development reduced from 120 gallons per day per bedroom to 80 gallons per day. And that helped a lot in freeing up capacity and making capacity go further. We further worked with Senator Newton and other legislators here in 2023 on Senate Bill 693 that further reduced that number to 75 gallons per day per bedroom, and also has language in it to allow us to start utilizing the capacity that's being built with the expansion sooner before it comes online, to start allocating that towards projects, knowing that those projects take time to be built. So those were definitely two good moves or steps that Senator Newton and other legislators worked with us to help Cabarrus County and other communities. We are planning for the future. So 34 million gallon a day will be our expansion that comes online in 2027. But what do we need and where do we go beyond that? And how do we ensure that we're prepared and don't end up in a situation where we do have to turn the faucet off, if you want to say, for growth, because no one wants that. So we began in 2022 with an extensive master planning process with a team of professional engineers that are experts in their area, much like you heard from the parks area. These are a lot of local people, but also national people looking into how we plan for the future. Worked a lot with county staff, with the jurisdictional staffs in our area to plan for future growth, all the way down to parcel level looks at how these parcels are going to likely develop into the future and at what time frame. That plan does show that by the year 2050, our wastewater needs in Cabarrus County almost double from where they're at right now, which it probably sounds reasonable. We know we're going to grow a lot in the next 27 years, I guess you would say. The report did focus on a 20-year plan with a heaviest focus on the initial 10 years. But from a flow projection standpoint, we looked at year 2050 was the year. So we went 27 years on a flow wastewater needs standpoint. So what does this data let us do? This data lets us, one, start putting together a capital improvement plan and a know kind of what we're going to need financially into the future and what expansions are going to be needed in the future. But it also allows us to start permitting some of these needs, to permitting future potential wastewater treatment plant sites, possibly if we want other sites to have wastewater treatment plants instead of just expanding Rocky River, or obtaining a larger discharge permit for Rocky River so it is in hand when it's needed. Part of this look also looked at drinking water needs, because obviously they go hand in hand. You've got to have the drinking water to produce the wastewater. So that was also a big part of the process, was looking at water supply needs, where are other water supplies as we need them into the future as growth demands it, and working very closely with Concord and Kannapolis with those plans. So with that, any questions? I do have a few pictures here that were in your pocket or in your packet of expansion efforts taking place at the plant. Give you an idea, it's hard to, like we're talking about the courthouse, it's hard to really gain an appreciation of it until you're actually there. But the bottom picture in the center, that is actually a 5 million gallon a day tank right there. It's about 150 foot in diameter and about 32 feet tall. So pretty massive structures being built. But we were lucky. We did this from a progressive design build, alternative delivery method. Have a great engineer and a great contractor that has really worked hard for our community to stay on schedule and on budget as we move through this project. So that was a lot, very fast, so please, any questions, be happy to answer.
The picture on the bottom in the center that you had pointed out, is that what it looks like before liquid is in there, like the pictures at the top?
Correct. So the picture at the top, obviously, we're expanding an actively operating wastewater treatment plant. So the picture of the top middle, the two tanks you see water in it, those are clarifiers that are in use today. So those have water in them. The bottom tank does not. It will eventually, as we move forward. The tanks on the top are about 1 MGD, or 1 million gallon, whereas the bottom is about 5 MGD.
Wow.
So,
It's a big difference.
yeah, big difference.
Chad, you talked about the paper capacity and many thanks to Senator Newton and the other legislatures for recognizing and addressing that problem. Originally, we were at 120 per bedroom per day, and we dropped to 80 per bedroom per day. Now 75.
Correct.
So it's pretty significant improvement. So what is your actual figure per bedroom per day that you see coming into the facility?
It's about 45 gallons per day per bedroom.
Okay, I've been saying 48, so I'm glad I asked that question. It's
Correct.
significantly
Significantly
less than, well, certainly when we were at 120. So that means, and of course, you addressed the fact that there was a lot of developer-controlled capacity out there. So if I've got 200 acres of land and I come in and I say, I'm going to build a house on half-acre lots so I can build 400 houses. And every single one of those houses is going to have 4 bedrooms in it. And I get permitted for that, and I know that there are some limitations on that right now as far as allocations to municipalities, but I can go in, and when I do that, all that capacity then is set aside and reserved for me.
Yes.
I may never build those houses, or I might build 50 of them this year, 50 of them next year, but we have to sit on that capacity all that time, correct?
They do have a 2-year window that they have to start the
Okay.
project. So
Uh-huh.
if they have not started that project and put in water and sewer infrastructure within 2 years, they would lose that capacity. But once they put that infrastructure in and say they built 10 homes and then it took them 15 years to build the other 190,
Right.
that capacity is held up over that time period.
Yeah, and so that we got a little bit of relief on that in this last legislation,
Right.
in that we don't have to just sit, I mean, that 5 million gallon vessel
Yes.
that we're looking at there, potentially could be sitting there waiting
Mhm.
on them to build the rest of those houses. I know I'm exaggerating
Yes.
the numbers a little bit, but now, we can go ahead and use that capacity for some other new projects while we're building this. So I'm sure that helps.
It does, and a good way to think about it is when that 120 reduces to 75, we got to assign that to projects that were already allocated. So
Right.
our number was about 4 million gallons of developer-controlled capacity. When that approved, overnight, that number dropped to about 3 million gallons.
Yeah.
So that was 1 million gallons available to allocate projects. But then also now, when that 200 4-bedroom homes come, they don't take as much capacity. So
Right.
you kind of get it on both sides of it, which is a big help. But an important thing to understand is that 3 million gallons of capacity that's sitting out there developer control now, if it all came online today, it would only produce about 1.6, 1.7 million gallons of flow, meaning you would have 1.3 million gallons of capacity that now you could allocate out to more
Yeah,
projects.
that'd be the difference between the 48 and the
Yes.
70, or
Right. And
Or
that's the
45 and 70, you said
Yeah.
45.
And that's been the frustration that we've had with the state in this argument all along is, we all want to protect the resource. No one wants to be irresponsible. That's something we all take very serious. But we also don't want to have a very expensive resource sitting there going underutilized in a community that's rapidly growing. And that was really a big driver by Senator Newton and in Senate Bill 693, was to, not just our community, but other communities, to try to allow these resources to be utilized, because they're expensive, and the need is there. So,
Yeah, and we've been very fortunate to have the space allocated for these expansions. I'm not sure how many more might be available, but is there a discharge limit? I mean, or do we have issues to be concerned about there as to the treated water that's been discharged into the river?
yeah, and I didn't mention that during our master planning process, but permitting requires you essentially to prove to the state that you're not going to do damage to the resource, to the river. So in our case, it's the Rocky River. The model that had been done for the Rocky River was done in the very early 80s and was very out of date. So part of our master plan was to actually go in and model the Rocky River all the way from Norwood up to Mooresville. So it was 95 miles of river. City of Mooresville and City of Charlotte partnered with us on funding of that because they benefit from that model being available to be able to get an accurate discharge permit. There is capacity available in the river. It will mean over time tighter limits. Tighter limits mean a little more expensive capacity to build, but there is capacity available in that river. And we're really going to have to study in depth, does it make sense to potentially have another wastewater treatment plant somewhere else in our
Right.
community, or to continue to expand Rocky River and/or both as we grow. That's something that will just, it's essentially a financial analysis of what makes sense to serve our community.
Right. And the Muddy Creek facility is downstream, correct? I
Correct.
noticed there was some
Correct.
money in the budget, state budget for improvements there. Can you
Correct.
just talk,
Yes,
is that
so-
to increase capacity?
Yeah, that's to increase capacity there. So that's a 300,000 gallon a day plant that's currently treating about 180,000 gallons a day. So it's treating about 65, 70% of capacity. So yeah, project will begin soon to look at expanding that plant as well, and what steps are necessary. And the population projections, flow projections coming out of the master plan will be utilized for how to size that
Right.
expansion.
And that too is another project, just trying to get ahead of the curve. I mean,
Correct.
we're not at capacity.
Correct.
We're not turning anybody down in that area because of the inadequacies of that plant.
Correct.
So what is our agreement with Mecklenburg County? Do we not accept some,
We do. So at the completion of this expansion project to 34 million gallons a day, Mecklenburg will own 9 million gallons of capacity at the Rocky River plant. Charlotte Water has an agreement to purchase up to 12 million gallons a day of capacity at the plant, and that agreement was reached, came to in 1999. And it kind of came along with the Pilatex closing down and bringing on revenue
Right.
and a partner that made sense there. They purchase their capacity up front, so when we do these expansions and they partner into these expansions, then they pay for their portion of that expansion up front. That is not a payback over time to Wasac. And then that is their capacity to utilize from their system. We currently treat about 5 million gallons a day from Charlotte Mecklenburg.
Right.
They have 6 million gallons of capacity right now. The completion of this expansion, they will have 9.
yeah, and I guess, and I asked that question because I feel like there are probably some developers out there that maybe have been delayed on some of their projects because of the allocations, that situation that we've been involved in. and they would ask that question. Why is Cabarrus County doing this for Mecklenburg County? I think your answer is a good one, because we needed that support desperately when we lost our biggest customer that used 50% of the total capacity of the plant, right?
Yes, and Charlotte Water is a very important strategic partner from a utility standpoint for Cabarrus County, both from a water supply. Concord, Kannapolis, Harrisburg all have interconnects with Charlotte Water from a water supply standpoint. The Rocky River essentially follows the county line, so gravity essentially brings quite a bit of wastewater towards Cabarrus County. It's just it's a good strategic partnership, and we work very well with each other.
Right.
From that standpoint. So, but you're 100% correct. At the time in the early 2000s, replacing some of that lost flow and revenue was very important for Wasatch, and made a lot of sense. And it's been a good partnership.
Yeah. So when this, these two expansion projects are completed, and of course, you've already explained that during that process, we've already freed up substantial amount of capacity. I guess the question, I mean, you know, we've probably all heard from developers out there over the past couple of years. You know, I had a contract to sell this property to be developed, and now it has fallen through because they could not get the sewer capacity numbers. How much do we anticipate that's going to improve? Or is that going to continue to be a challenge because we have so much interest and so many people taking a look at us?
Well, I think each community, each jurisdiction is going to handle it a little bit differently. I think our communities have stepped back and looked at and realized that not all growth is good growth, that some projects make more sense than others. And having a better idea and control over that makes a lot of sense. So that ultimately will be up to our jurisdictions of how they manage that capacity. Our community is now being asked to kind of operate like most communities, growing communities do in North Carolina. We did have, with the closure of Pilatex, we did have a large amount of capacity available for a long time, and developers got very accustomed to, if they wanted capacity, they got it. There's not many communities in this state that are growing that are that way. I mean, our neighbor, Union County is a good example, that have lived in a very tough lifestyle from a capacity standpoint, and we don't want to be there. We don't want to be in Union County's shoes. But I think some of our jurisdictions are going to continue to be a little more selective on their projects as they move forward. Of what makes sense, and the value of this capacity is immense. I mean, it's a valuable commodity, and you know, when you look at job creating projects, or you look at potential mixed use projects, you know, a lot of them make a lot more sense than a single home community may for a community.
Right.
So I think it will continue to be something that's more controlled than it has been.
And so you talked about these two expansion projects, and and you've thrown out a lot of figures, but I think $250 million is the total for these two phases. Where's that money coming from? How are we paying for that?
Okay, so 40% of that cost is being borne by Charlotte Water, because they are purchasing capacity at a 40% rate with this expansion. So that they're funding up front. So that money. So we are actually paying for 60% of that $250 million. That's all. The first phase, the $100 million, there was about $63 million of revenue bonds that were issued for payment of that first.
Which revenue bonds means we borrowed money.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
I think that probably, you know, it's not a topic we talk about a whole lot, but the way the Water and Sewer Authority began initially was a contribution of assets from various municipalities in the county, as well as the county itself. We had all these different people in the sewer business.
Yes.
And the water businesses as well. And so they all collaborated, partnered together, contributed their assets to form the Water and Sewer Authority. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Explanation?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess this, the topic of sewage has been one that we've discussed more probably in the last 24 months than we have. Of course, your chart showed why.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes, correct.
Commissioners, other questions?
Thank you for being here.
Oh, yeah.
And while you're here, I was going to see if you could touch on, you always explain it easily. When I came to Wasack, you refer to it as buckets.
Yes.
So each municipality has a bucket. So if I'm correct, you guys give the allocation, and then it's up to each one of those individual municipalities to divide that bucket, how they sit via single-family homes, apartments, commercial.
Correct.
Is that a correct statement?
That is correct, yes. So as capacity comes available with each expansion, then there's interlocal agreements that are agreed to firstly by our board, and then presented to each governing body of that jurisdiction and the county for approval of how that capacity will be divided up. Primarily, that's controlled by the 5-year annual average flow. So the percentage of flow that you have, wastewater flow to the Rocky River plant will determine how much capacity you get going forward.
Since we fielded a lot of these questions, I just wanted to put,
Yes.
so you guys give the original. If somebody's project doesn't get approved versus somebody else's, your hands are out of it at that point. That's up to each.
Correct. When a project comes to us when a project comes to developing in Cabarrus County, they need 2 flow acceptances. They need one from the jurisdiction that's going to be providing flow, saying we have capacity within our collection system, pump stations, whatever it may go through to support this project. Then it comes to Wasack for a flow acceptance saying we also have capacity within our conveyance system and at the wastewater treatment plant. So when we receive a flow acceptance from City of Concord, say all we're doing is looking at Concord's allocation numbers and saying you have this much available, so we approve the project. And that's all we're doing on our end.
Other questions? Well, my last visit out to the Rocky River facility, two things that stuck with me. Number one, flushable wipes are bad. They're not really
Yes.
a good thing to
They're not a
put.
friend of the wastewater industry.
Right, right. And the other thing that I remember is after going through the entire process, I was invited to have a drink of the water that was being discharged back into the river, which I did not accept that because I couldn't reach down
Yeah,
that far. But
I don't blame you.
yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us.
And I would like to offer anyone that ever would like a tour of the plant expansion, feel free, anytime you have questions, things come up, reach out to Mike Wilson or myself. I'll be happy to take the time.
Great.
right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Okay, we move now to discussion items for action. First up, from Active Living and Parks, we're happy to have Ian Sweeney to talk about the matching incentive grant project approval.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. So we are seeking board approval for 4 matching incentive grant projects. The approved FY24 budget is $50,000 for this program. All of these applicants presented their projects to the commission, the Active Living and Parks Commission, on September 21st, and the commission recommended that they all be funded. That's a total county match for all 4 of them of $24,533. Applicants included Cabarrus County 4-H for a picnic table outdoor learning space at Cooperative Extension. They're just going to create a learning space that's ADA accessible, allow the coordinators to expand their current programming and, use it for new programs as well. We also had an application from Hartsville Athletic Association. This is for lawnmowers for Rocky River Elementary School, and it's going to be maintained by Hartsville Athletic Association. The school's kind of taken over maintenance of those ball fields, and recently we updated the application to have the support equipment be a priority 2 in the matching incentive grant program. Priority 1 being new facilities, priority 2 being support facilities, priority 3 being new land. Third applicant was Concord Rotary Club for bike repair stations at McEachern Greenway, Brown Mill Mountain Bike Trail Park, and H.H. Greenway Mills at Rocky River. And these repair stations include pumps, bike racks, all on a concrete pad with a bench. And those are going to be maintained by the city of Concord. So if someone breaks a chain when they're 2 miles into a ride, they don't have to carry their bike, that far. And we did have a story about that happening. And then lastly, Weddington Hills PTO submitted an application for a nature trail beautification and an outdoor classroom at their Lenora Barren Nature Trail. So a place for kids to learn outdoors, spend more time outdoors, maybe even engage in theater and artistic work. So again, the Alps Commission did recommend that they be funded. Total county matched, county portion of $24,533. And I want to mention that if these are approved, we'll have $25,000 left to match for seed money for other projects. So for the listening public or anyone involved with a nonprofit that operates on Cabarrus County or Board of Education property that has a project they're passionate about, please go to the website, cabarruscounty.com/alps, find the application, my information, reach out. We'll see if we can't help you get your project up and running. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you about the projects.
Questions for Ian? Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, next up is item 4.2, for appointments to boards and committees. You all have a copy of all of those in your agenda and should have received emails about them as well. Those include the Early Childhood Task Force Advisory Board and the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of those? If not, we'll move on, and those will go on to our consent agenda. And so as we approach the 2-hour mark, I would suggest that we take about a 15-minute break and be back here at 6 o'clock, if that's agreeable to everyone. All right, thank you. Okay, we are at the 6 o'clock mark. If everybody could get back, we will begin where we left off. And so we start with item 4.3 from Department of Human Services, Budget Revision for Adult Protective Services, Essential Program Services Fund. And we're happy to have Anthony Hodges to lead us in that discussion.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to come out and speak with you tonight. What I'm coming about for today is it's funding that we're receiving through the Division of Aging and Adult Services. It's Adult Protective Services Essential Services Fund, and this is actually the third allocation of that. I've come a couple times over the last year and a half to 2 years with funding that we've gotten for that. And what this funding is for those individuals or adults that have, we've went out and did assessments and they've been deemed to be in need of protective services. They're adults. This funding is set aside to help us provide either services or goods to them to help prevent further, either to rectify the situation or prevent further APS situation. And it can cover a multitude of things for their physical health, mental health, personal hygiene, assistance with food, nutrition, shelter, and just some of the things we spent the prior funding for. We've done electrical repairs to a house. We've paid for in-home aid services when they didn't qualify for any other services, bought medical equipment when the insurance wouldn't pay for it. One gentleman in particular, in this last allocation, he hadn't had electricity in his house for over a year, and which had a well, so didn't have water either. We paid the reconnect fees for that and to help, and that prevented a lot of further issues with him. But these funds, again, it is for FY '24, and it's $7,559.74, and there is no county match required, and we have until the end of May of 2024 to spend the funds. So, any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, questions for Anthony? All right,
Thank you.
thank you, sir. And we move to item 4.4, Transportation Fiscal Year '24 Rural Operating Assistance Program, and we're happy to have Bob Bushy with us. And Charles.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us come before you today to present our FY '24 Rural Operating Assistant Program Grant, or ROPE. The ROPE grant provides trip funding for the following programs: elderly handicap, the RGP, which is Rural General Public, and employment. This year, we're receiving $73,838. The only match requirement is 10% for the RGP program, and that match comes from our RGP ticket sales. There's no public hearing required for this grant. We're requesting that you accept the grant and the associated resolution, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Charles, this, this means that we have to pick up in a rural area, but then they can be transported wherever they need to get. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, item 4.5, Shady Brook Elementary School chiller replacement. And we have Jim Howden and several associates.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank y'all for letting us come. I'm Scott Rogers, Assistant Director of Operations of Kannapolis City Schools for about 30 more days. Then I'll be the Director starting November 1st. Chuck Taylor and his group from the Cabarrus County Maintenance went in to do an assessment on a compressor at Shady Brook Elementary, found out that there was a bad compressor. They went to replace it at the tune of about $70,000 when they figured out that the seals on the compressor or the chiller had gone bad. They could repair it, but they don't know what else is wrong with it. And that's the biggest fear, is the fear of the unknown, as far as once they get into it, what else is wrong with it. Chuck and I believe that it's the best use of public funds to replace the unit entirely. We'd also like to consider a 10-year service contract because of escalating costs of troubleshooting, refrigerant, and mobilization fees. We're hoping that we can do this job. We'll find out for sure tomorrow exactly the quote that we're going to have. But we're hoping we can do this job for about $325,000 for a full chiller replacement at Shady Brook Elementary. But we'd like to ask for emergency funding not to exceed $450,000, just in case we run into any other issues. Our fear is that if we don't get this ordered now, it's not going to be here because of lead times before the hot weather comes next year. So that's sort of where we're at, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If there's any technical questions, I'm going to lean on Chuck a little bit.
Questions for Scott?
Just one, for either one of you. The 70,000 you spent, are those parts gonna be usable for something else that we have?
Yes, sir, they are.
So my question would be, we've talked a lot about chillers and, I guess, units for schools over the past couple of months. And so the full replacement, you said not to exceed 450,000. Some of these other conversations we had, we were talking millions of dollars for these. So what is, I'm not complaining that you're only
asking
asking.
the difference between like this and the Forest Park.
Yeah, I'm not
The
complaining
millions.
that it's,
So Chuck could better explain that most likely.
just how there's that big discrepancy.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is the replacement of the chiller plant itself inside that school in the system. Forest Park and the other larger dollar amounts that you're speaking to is a complete HVAC replacement, piping, air handling units, everything,
Okay,
controls.
okay.
That's where the cost comes in, and especially with a renovation job, the demo cost.
Okay.
That's what drives it.
Just curious.
Okay. And so I guess the question to Jim is, where's the money coming from?
We would recommend that the money comes from the Community Investment Fund. We have fund balance available there, but the BA submitted is for 400,000. If you're going to approve 450, I would recommend we make that change.
Yes. And so if I'm understanding correctly, you think it's going to be 325, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes, sir.
Hopefully, yeah. So I guess we have two options. We could go ahead and approve it for 400 as is written in our agenda, and then should the cost exceed that, come back, but I don't know how the timing works on that.
Chuck, you want to speak to the timing?
Yes, sir. I would like the commission to please consider this an emergency, and the reason I say that is the lead times involved with ordering this equipment. If we don't get this equipment on order as soon as possible, it's very likely the equipment will not show up in time for next year's hot weather.
Yeah, and I guess the timing question I was asking was the difference between 400 and 450. If that's something we'll know down the road, or,
Yes, sir. I believe we'll know that this week. I should have some pricing back tomorrow.
yeah, well, and then I would say it's probably important that we maybe edit and consider the 450 total, as opposed to what's in our documents, so that in the event that happens, we don't have any delay.
Yeah, and I think if you give us authority at not to exceed 450,000, obviously if it comes in lower than that, that's what the budget amendment will
Right.
reflect. Yes.
Okay. And so commissioners, I think they are requesting that we suspend the rules and vote on this tonight. So what would be your pleasure in that area?
I'll make a motion that we suspend the rules for the 450, up to 450,000.
Okay, that'd actually be two separate motions, one to suspend the rule and then a motion to approve that.
Yep.
Yes.
To suspend the rules.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I do want to have just one question for, this would probably be a good time for us to find out from Chuck, you the man over at the schools. But Shady Brook is a relatively old school. Now, when do you determine, it's like Commissioner Meismer was talking about situations where we run into HVAC systems that cost millions. And then Chuck, you said that that's because we have to replace the plumbing and the piping and the air handler and the whole kit and caboodle, you might say.
Yes.
Well, with this school being as old as it is, why wouldn't you do that to this school as well?
I would recommend that we do that at some point, sir, but at this point, we have a chiller that's failed, and it's making a precedent, or it's more important and priority at this time. This is just one example of how priorities change within facilities. So at this point in time, our priority is to get that chiller back up and running, and I believe we can keep the school on a normal budgetary cycle and request so that we're not asking you for millions of dollars.
Sure. Yeah, and I understand that part. That's no problem with that. But this just brings to light that sometimes we may have situations where we're asking for hypothetically 3 or 4 million to replace all of that stuff, when really in reality, we can do the same thing that we're doing at Shady Brook. Just like in a home situation, when your heat pump goes out, you replace your heat pump. You don't replace all of the heating and air and plumbing and venting and all of that stuff, because it's already there. And so that was what my question was, how do you make that determination when it's time to replace everything for millions versus replacing just the chiller for a couple $100,000?
For us, most of the time, the priority, because we have so many facilities, is based on age of the school, who's up next, who has the most priority as far as age-wise. But it's also the amount of work orders we're generating, how many times we're having to repair it, how much money we're putting into it. And at this time, we really feel like we can replace that chiller plant and deal with some of the other facilities that are in more dire need.
Yeah.
And more of their system is affected.
Well, I mean that I trust your knowledge and, your education on this type thing, because you've been doing it a long time, and what we do is peanuts to what you've been doing prior to coming with us. And I appreciate that. But like I say, though, I just couldn't figure out why, an old school like this, you say, well, we'll do the chiller, when we got schools that's probably newer than this, that we want to replace the whole thing for millions. How do you determine that? See, do you understand
Yes,
what
sir.
I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think every situation, every school it's got different, it's an individual, you have to look at them individually. I think they're doing the best they can do with the resources they have, but they're all gonna be different situations. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. In the case of Shady Brook, it was built or opened in 2006, according to my records. So we're looking at 17 years.
17 years.
So there are systems in our, or HVAC systems we have in our facilities that come a decade before that. But because most of the manufacturing, that some of this is Chuck's personal opinion, but some of our manufacturing was done in country at that time. Most of our manufacturing has been exported. So the quality of the equipment and materials you're receiving now, it's not the same. We're not on the same playing field. So you may actually see, as we move forward in time, less life cycle in the equipment we have. Hopefully that explains that.
That's not good, but okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to challenge your comment about Shady Brook being an old school. I graduated from Shady Brook, and they tore it down and built a brand new one, and now you're saying the brand new one's old. But I'm still considering that brand new.
Well, I'm only going on what they tell me. The new ones are now the old ones.
Okay, well, the motion on the floor is to suspend the rules of procedure. So do we have any further discussion on that? If not, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes.
Thank you very
And-
much. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I would move to approve the budget amendment and authorize the funds to be used for a chiller replacement at Shady Brook Elementary School not to exceed $450,000. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Very much. Appreciate it. No problem.
Okay, and next item, 4.6, updated annual budget ordinance, and Jim Howden will lead us in that discussion.
Good evening, Commissioners. We are being required to change the opioid budget ordinance type that we are using. Originally, we were instructed that a multi-year grant project ordinance would be allowed, and all counties were informed that they could do this, and we've been doing this for a couple years. We had a meeting a few months ago, or not even a few, about a month ago, with the LGC and the School of Government, and they informed us that based on the agreement the state signed, that we cannot use a grant, multi-year grant project ordinance. We can either use a capital project ordinance, or we have to budget these funds annually as part of our annual budget ordinance. Since we are not using these funds at this time for our capital project, we feel our only option is to add this to our annual budget ordinance, and that's what we've done. So we're just asking the board to approve the updated budget ordinance and the budget amendment that corresponds to these funds being added.
Okay, questions for Jim? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next is item 4.7, behavioral health, amended resolution to direct the expenditure of opioid settlement funds. We're happy to have Dr. Elise Pugh-Lilly to lead that discussion. Welcome.
Great. Good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Chairman Morris, and good evening, Commissioners. As Chairman Morris mentioned, my name is Elise Pugh-Lilly, and I'm the new Behavioral Health Director for Cabarrus County. And I will, Jim actually set the stage for our conversation tonight, and if you'll just humor me, I thought it might be helpful for us just to have a really quick refresher on the North Carolina opioid settlement, and that'll set the stage for the two resolutions that I'm bringing forth for you tonight for consideration. All right, again, just in terms of an overview, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the settlement funds. Please let me know if you do have any questions, and then I will talk about those two agenda items. So as you all remember, of course, North Carolina was part of a national settlement agreement related to the crippling opioid epidemic that we're experiencing across our nation. And the funds that North Carolina will receive are coming in two waves currently, and potentially more waves as additional settlements are actually forthcoming. So this first wave of funding was related to those three big distributors, and the funds are to be used to support treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and other life-saving measures. And then in terms of the Wave 2 funds, those will be combined now with Wave 1 funds. So last year in fiscal year 23, we already received an allocation related to Wave 1 funds. Now, moving forward, we'll get Wave 1 and Wave 2 funds each fiscal year. And the monies are front-loaded. So last year, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next one. Last year, Cabarrus County received approximately $1.4 million. And in the current fiscal year, we're slated to receive over $3 million. And then again, monies will continue to be forthcoming over the course of the next 18 years. I'm going to go back for just a second to let you know that currently the state of North Carolina is staged to receive approximately $1.5 billion as part of the settlement agreement. And again, there are settlements that are still pending, so that number could change. That's just a little bit of information in terms of how North Carolina made allocations, and they used a formula based on a variety of different factors, including the number of pills that were actually prescribed in a community, the number of individuals that were diagnosed with an opioid use disorder, and the like. So as Jim just alluded to, there are some pretty rigid requirements in terms of how the funds can be spent and allocated and based on the agreements that each of the 100 local governments had with the state with respect to use of these funds. So we must satisfy both the memorandum of agreement as well as state law requirements. And Jim just kind of alluded to in terms of having to set up a special fund related to it as well. So here are the state law requirements, that the funds must be properly budgeted before they're spent, and you all, as the governing body, must approve how we're spending the funds locally. And then we must adopt both an authorizing resolution and a formal budget ordinance. And then in terms of the North Carolina Memorandum of Agreement, there's 5 broad requirements related to it: establishing and using a special revenue fund, authorizing the spending ahead of time, so we can't spend any of the funds without your permission, understanding and following both option A and option B strategies, and I'll mention those again in just a second, following all of the reporting requirements, and then holding an annual public meeting. And for us in Cabarrus County, we held our first annual public meeting on July the 19th of this year. So we've already fulfilled that requirement. And also, we've just last week, we completed all of our first wave of reporting requirements to the state as well. So we're definitely on target now in Cabarrus County. Just a little bit more information about the Memorandum of Agreement. So there's 2 different options, and option A is a list of 12 evidence-based high-impact strategies. And again, I'll talk about that again in just a second. And then option B opens up the door for a longer list of more comprehensive strategies. And we are trending in the direction of going with option B, and I'll talk about that too, because that's related to the second resolution that we're bringing forward to you tonight. So in terms of option A, these are the 12 strategies that, with approval from the board, no further action would be needed as long as we're fulfilling both those requirements in terms of following the Memorandum of Agreement requirements as well as the state law requirements. So, setting the stage for the first agenda item, back in January of this year, this board approved $70,000 per fiscal year for the next 3 fiscal years to be used by Cabarrus Health Alliance related to one of those 12 option A strategies, right? And so just as Jim was talking about that the state has now come back and kind of fine-tuned the process, they did so on the strategy side as well. So just over the summer, we received more guidance from the state in terms of what those resolutions should look like. However, following the will of the community, you all had already approved a resolution back in January. But what I'm bringing for your consideration tonight is we need to make an amendment to that resolution to make sure that every strategy that Cabarrus Health Alliance will actually be utilizing is included in that resolution. And I'll show those resolutions to you, those strategies to you in just a second. So again, back in January, you all approved $210,000 as match funding for the next 3 fiscal years. For fiscal year 23, $70,000 was issued to Cabarrus Health Alliance. And in terms of actually how they use those funds, they're using those funds in fiscal year 23 to hire a peer support specialist. They did that in June of this year. And so the person actually hadn't started any services per se, right? So they hired the individual was going through training and onboarding. So we still have time to amend this resolution to ensure that it's in compliance with all of the different interventions that person will be delivering to individuals within our community. So back in January, the one strategy 3, was included in the resolution, which is very appropriate because, as you can see, it's related to the hiring of a peer support specialist. Now that we have a little bit more guidance from the state and we know exactly what this person will be doing, we'd like to add strategy 7. So strategy 7 is related to distribution of naloxone. I'm sure you all are aware that naloxone is a medication that's used as an antidote to an opioid overdose or a suspected opioid overdose. It is truly a life-saving intervention. So how it works is it works immediately. As you all know, we have receptors in our brain. So for a person who has ingested opioids, what naloxone does is that it ostensibly kicks the opioid off the receptors, and it'll immediately wake the person up. So it is truly, like I said, a life-saving exercise. So in terms of what, again, that peer support specialist will be doing using the funds that we've already approved, this is just kind of some bullets in terms of how that position has been designed. So she will be doing some linkage to care based on participant needs. She'll be doing some peer support, some outreach, and then also, should a person need it, she would also be distributing naloxone. That's why we need to add that strategy 7, because everything needs to align, as Jim was just kind of alluding to, and on the financial end, on the program end, it needs to align as well. So I'll pause right there and answer any questions. And again, this is all, what I just presented is related to the first agenda item related to behavioral health.
Questions for Elise?
right.
Think you explained it well.
Great, wonderful. So now I'll move on to our second agenda item, and that is, the print is so tiny. That's okay. Is related to what we would like to do moving forward. So earlier I mentioned that under the memorandum of agreement, there's 2 options. There's option A and there's option B. What option B affords us is the opportunity to access a longer, more comprehensive list of strategies. As a requirement of that, as dictated by the state, we must go through a collaborative strategic planning process in order to open the door for us to even consider that longer list of strategies, if that makes sense. And so, with guidance from county leaders, I put together an RFP in August related to the collaborative strategic planning process. There is a description of it based on the North Carolina Memorandum of Agreement, and I'm happy to provide a link that shares a little bit more information about the process to you as well. Skip that one and go to where we are right now. So in August, I released an RFP. It was open for a month and a half. The deadline was September the 15th. And then I compiled an opioid review team, and you can see the individuals who were part of that team. Not only was, of course, behavioral health represented, but we had representation from the sheriff's office, from EMS, we had representation from Human Services, as well as from Cabarrus Health Alliance. So the 5 of us got together, we reviewed the 8 submissions. We're really happy with the number of submissions that we received, so it was a very competitive process, and we used a scoring matrix to score all 8 submissions. And then in terms of that scoring matrix, I didn't identify the firms, but you can kind of see the different criteria that we used and then the scores. And you can see submission 2 rose to the top. So the total number for that submission was 151 in comparison to the other submissions. And so, without further ado, in terms of the name of the firm, it is Health Management Associates. And we are fortunate to have a representative here tonight from Health Management Associates for your consideration. So I would like to invite John Ellert to the table.
Thank you, Dr. Pewley. Commissioners, it's great to be before you tonight and to be here in Cabarrus County and seeing lots of old familiar faces. I have family who reside here in Cabarrus County, and I'm just 20 miles away, and it's a pleasure to be doing this work, very important work that you'll be considering tonight, given what Dr. Pewley has presented to you. I think most of us know, and I'll introduce myself. I'm John Eller. Before I kick it off, I've been in government for 23 years at the county level, while I was retiring, and now doing work that I'm passionate about to continue to carry the work along. And this is definitely something that's near and dear to me as well, in the work that we're doing in the health and human services space and behavioral health space and substance use space, because how many of us have had friends, families, neighbors who've been impacted by this and in a very negative way. And so you're doing something really proactive. You're not proceeding down a path of a cookie cutter approach. You're making it the Cabarrus way and thinking about what your community says they need, what you're hearing from your constituents that they need, and with the support of county leadership pushing this work in a very positive way. So we'll talk about what you have in front of you as the proposal that the team reviewed. What I'm going to give you tonight is the executive summary of that, because I know you have a lot to track on and a lot to read, and back on the farm, we say it's about supper time. So I want to get you moving here. Okay.
Lauren's going to pull it up.
Lauren, you
for
got it? Okay, sorry. I thought it was right after this.
It is.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go through the quick agenda items again, and I can do this in a way that I think will give you a good foundation based on what Dr. Pilotti has already stated to you. But a quick overview of our firm and our team. We've been around for a while, so we were founded in 1985. We have several consultants across the nation, but obviously I'm born and raised in North Carolina. I'm here very close, so I'll be able to support Cabarrus County through the strategic planning process. And understanding the local government structure is super important in this space, because we want to make sure that the boards are involved, the community's involved, advisory committees are involved, staff at departments are involved in this process, and we'll go through what that process looks like. But our firm is very well founded on substance use disorder and opioid use disorders, as well as behavioral health and health and human services programs. So we're able to see it from a very collective way. And so we provide a consultant in all 50 states across the country. And the thing that I think we'll be able to bring to this project that I hope you'll be pleased with at the end of this engagement with you is going to be, what are the national best practices in this space that you may want to modify for Cabarrus County that may work for you as you hear from constituents about what's very important for them. The other thing about our firm that's a differentiator is a lot of firms delegate work down to junior colleagues or less experienced staff. You're getting persons who used to sit as department directors in counties or work for substance abuse organizations at the federal or state level. So we get how the systems interplay and work really well together. So as you think about us and helping you work through this process as a partner, we have a lot of experience. We have we're doing presentations across the country. We're doing strategic plans with governments about this important topic. And so having the ability to do that with Cabarrus County, we're honored that you're considering us for this. The thing that I think also differentiates our firm is that our stakeholder engagement process is pretty robust. And I think that's what you want and need to make sure your community voice is heard in this process. So that you prioritize, as Dr. Pilotti said, $21 million over the course of the next several years. That's a lot of money, and you want to make sure those investments are strategically made in a way that makes sense and works for you. So we'll be comparing and looking at a lot of data nationwide, a lot of data you have here in the community. But the thing that I really want to end this intro with before I introduce our team is really to let you know that we honor what's already been done in this county. There's been a lot of good work. I was just telling Manager Downs earlier, watching from afar, you've got some really great things happening in this county, and we want to build upon them. We don't want to duplicate them, replicate them, or start from scratch. So what's already been done that we can align, build upon as we go through this strategic planning process. So through the engagement, with our partnership, I'll be working with the county, and we have some subject matter experts that are known nationally in this space, Dr. Jean Glossa, Aaron Russell, and then we'll have project management support throughout this process, and then also the ability to have someone who can speak with Hispanic Latino populations as well, who can help support that. So as we think about this process, there's a few things I want to point out. And this is all in your packet too, but these are important points. Having done the work and grew up and began my work as a social worker, at the end of the day, once the MCOs can fund and do what they do and the behavioral health providers, the county's the one holding the bag. Social workers are stretched to do their jobs, EMS staff, law enforcement staff, public health staff, and then also hospital staff, and there's no resources for a lot of the things that we're talking about. And so what you're going to be able to do with these dollars is really identify what are those things that you hear about, what's fact, maybe what are some assumptions, but clarify those and figure out a way to prioritize those as we move forward. It's a very time-intensive process, because not only are we meeting with county staff, we're also meeting with your constituents in the community, groups that the staff here will help identify, but then also persons who have lived experience, who have either overcome their addiction to say, hey, here's some things in hindsight that would have really helped me that I hope the county considers, or persons who are actively going through that right now. And not just the persons, but the families of those individuals as well that we want to engage. So we'll have a robust process of that engagement along the way. And as you look at the work, and we think about the work that's already been done here and building upon that, this is kind of the process that we'll take here. So we'll start out by kicking the project off. We'll engage a lot of stakeholders throughout this project. We'll all agree upon, like, what is that vision we're trying to get to? Like in Cabarrus County in 15 to 20 years, what do we see? Where do we want this work to kind of land? And then figuring out how to align those future vision and those future states with the current work that's been done, as I mentioned before, and then see what are the gaps, what are we missing, but also what are the strengths that we can build upon. So we can get to those root cause analysis, and then the beauty of this at the end of the process is coming up with those strategies, listening to what's happening here that's working and maybe not so working well, but also nationally, what do we think could be replicated here in Cabarrus County? And then we'll prioritize those strategies. We'll think about ways to align those with existing things, as I mentioned, but then also identify goals and measures that we can have indicators for, that as we bring this back before the body in a final recommendation, that we'll be able to measure what future success looks like. Because what we don't want to do at the end of this process, and what we mentioned to the review committee when they were engaging us in this process, was if we just come up with a strategic plan for you and then leave, it doesn't do you a lot of good. What this is a strategic plan plus a framework to utilize as more dollars come into the county. You know what your priorities are, you know what your strengths are, but you also know what the gaps are and what those strategies ranked are, who those partners might be in the community that could help you meet those needs. But then after we're long gone, what framework can staff use to continue to utilize to be able to have the tools they need to look at the dollars coming in, the needs that exist, so there's kind of an annual revisit of this thing that staff will be able to use the framework to do. So we're very excited about that because it'll be a more sustainable option. And so as you think about this process and our stakeholder engagement process that we go through, I mean, we're going to actively involve communities. We'll be working with the project leadership here to really identify who are those stakeholders. And there may be constituents and groups that you want us to think about and consider as well. We don't pretend that our list is exhaustive because we know you hear from a lot of different people. But then also what we want to do is to be able to make sure that we have a diverse range of stakeholders, so different population groups, different municipalities, different parts of the county, different cultures, races, socioeconomics. But what we found in a lot of work across the country is this issue doesn't really know socioeconomic status. I mean, you're hearing about it in lots of different circles. And so we want to make sure we have a broad range of engagement there. And then we really need to identify the voices of those families involved, but also, as I said before, the persons with lived experience. So we're going to build trust throughout this process with hopefully your staff and the community as well. And as we do this, we'll bring it all together for you. And the timeline for that is really, we think we might be able to get this done well before our deadline, but you never know. I mean, we just simply don't know until we get into it what it's going to look like. But our proposed timeline to really finish this work up is on or before the end of June of '24, because we want you to be able to make some key decisions by then. And so the different phases that we're going to go through, and I'm not going to read all these, but I want you to be able to see them, is there's three big phases that we'll go through with this. Some of them I've already mentioned in the process that is in your book as well, so you'll be able to see that. But phase one is really after we kick off, we're going to dive right in. We're going to start identifying what we call artifacts, like what strategic reports have already been done in the county, what departments are doing which pieces, what annual reports do they have, what data sets do they have, what initiatives do they have, what programs are going on, and what other things in the community that are non-county organizations, non-county government organizations, what are they doing and working on? So we're going to start compiling all that stuff and understanding it and seeing kind of where's the crosswalk in all that, where's the nexus and those intersects that we want to identify. And so from that, we'll start seeing some gaps and needs emerge, no doubt, but we'll also see some strengths that we begin to see emerge. And then as we think about taking all that, we'll develop the report for you, create our interim findings, and what we'll do before we release anything is we'll work with the county staff and say, here's what we're seeing. Tell us what you think. Is this affirming what you're hearing, what you're experiencing every day, so that those who are living this every day, serving your constituents who are struggling with these kind of challenges, we want to affirm that, this is on target and what they're experiencing. And so once we align those strategies, as I mentioned, but also prioritize them, we'll come back at the very end of this process with a final report that not only helps us identify the next steps for the county based on your staff's feedback, your community's feedback, and your feedback as well, but we may also find that there's opportunities to braid funding. I always said it when I worked for the county government just can't fund everything, and we have to find ways to partner with community partners because there's lots of different funding streams. So can we braid funding together to solve some of these challenges so that community partners, federal grants, state grants, but also county support can help fund local partnerships, maybe even regional partnerships if there are opportunities out there for those unique instances where that may occur. And then we'll look at what needs to happen to implement each strategy that the team identifies. So with that, we'll lead to our final report. So I know I went through that really quick. You've got a lot of pages in front of you, but what I can tell you is the staff spent a lot of time going through this process, and I appreciate their work. They did their due diligence, and we don't see that level sometimes from some of our partners, but you should be really proud of your staff. They really care about this issue, and from knowing many of them from years ago, I can tell you they're in this work to make a difference, and like all of you are, and you're never thanked enough. So thank you for allowing us to be considered as part of this partnership and this important journey for this county. It's very important with me having family here as well, that they also are able to be proud of the work that the county's doing. So we appreciate you very much.
And so just to close the loop on that, we are requesting up to $250,000, not to exceed $250,000 for the collaborative strategic planning process.
And just real quick, two things that I think are important. So when John talks about the timeline going through June, keep in mind that does not mean that we have to sit idly by as important needs exist. So the 12 strategies that were shown earlier, they're option A. We can do those anytime the board wants to. And so there are things, I see Tessa back there, so medication-assisted treatment in the jail has been a hot topic and an issue that we may pursue before June. And so just keep that in mind, where we have the ability to move if we need to. And then the second one is with the investment of up to $250,000, that's roughly 1% of the $22 million over 18 years to get 99% right. And so we think this investment is important to make sure we spend these funds in the most impactful way possible.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the presentation. I'm glad that we are taking this approach. There have been literally hundreds of suggestions out there, and so I think for us to have a very measured, studied approach is going to be beneficial to us. So glad to have you assisting us with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, item 4.9 from Human Resources, Personnel Ordinance Update. We're happy to have Lundy Covington with us for that item.
Thank you, and good evening, Commissioners. I did start with one update, but as things go in HR, I did have another one come up today that is a bit time sensitive. So I presented you with two documents while you were out at your break. One was in the agenda packet, so I'll start with that one, and then I'll talk about the items that came up today. So the first area we would like to ask for some adjustments is basically an addition to the personnel ordinance for paid administrative leave. So in that document, you'll see the current language for what we call non-disciplinary suspension. That is without pay other than the employees are allowed to use their own time. So that's what we have right now, but we would like to add a new section to allow for actual paid leave in certain circumstances. So a few facts to kind of set that out. This would only be with county manager or sheriff's approval, so we would have a safeguard in there that it wouldn't be just, at a supervisor's discretion. There are some examples written in, if you'll scroll, Lauren, maybe to that next section. Yep. So there's some examples written in, and there are different examples we can think about as well, but just to give you a few, the sheriff's office has a policy right now for complaints against sheriff's employees, and they typically do use administrative leave for those situations where they're investigating. Another example would be discharge of a firearm, where, again, for safety reasons, for many reasons, we want the employee out until that's investigated and we know how it's going to be played out. Another more recent example was a fatality with human services. So there's just situations where we feel it would be more appropriate to allow the employee to be paid while we're going through that investigation process. Sometimes the investigation may be a little more lengthy, especially if we have an outside agency that's involved in that. So allowing them to be paid while we're going through it is just kind of a fairness option we would like to offer up. If there is discipline that needs to come through this, it would follow our normal policy. So if it gets to that point, we would transition and handle that. The other factor is we really feel like this would be an opportunity for employees to seek self-care if they need our EAP services or anything else, because a lot of times these are pretty difficult, challenging situations. So again, this would be in addition to the current ordinance. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions or if anyone else would like to chime in on that one.
Quite honestly, I thought we were already doing it. So I think it's a needed change.
To codify, I think we have been doing some with the sheriff's office, but to make sure it's under the same ordinance and we can do the same for both sides of the street if something were to happen here or another area. All righty, well, the second topic, we are in the midst of working on our longevity pay, the first round of longevity bonuses for employees. And I do want to say it has been very well received. Employees are very excited and looking forward to that first payment, which will be October 20th. So as we've been going through processing this and working with finance on the data, we have found a little gap or two. One item is around reinstatement. So originally it was proposed that we would just go with the latest hire date, but looking at how we've handled some other benefits with reinstatement, it's not always consistent. So what we're proposing are changes to both sections to allow employees who have been reinstated to receive the longevity pay. The ordinance language that we have is a 1-year window, so if you're back within a year of the time you depart, we can reinstate and you would receive benefits. So we want to spell that out a little more so it's very clear. The county manager does have the discretion to approve somebody if they've been away longer, if the circumstances warrant. And truthfully, in this recruitment environment, this is just another tool that would really help us. We're basically looking at it and saying, we want to welcome these folks back and not penalize them, but treat them the same as other employees who are currently employed. So there are two different sections, again, it would impact. The other thing we spotted is with our friends with Cooperative Extension, we want to rectify the state side of that because some of them are eligible for payments for longevity with the state, and we want to make sure they're getting something, but we don't want them to be able to double dip and get some from both. So adding in some language just to make sure we safeguard that a little bit more. The highlighted information is some I had in process with legal, so I was hoping we could get that rectified. I did get a thumbs up while you were at your break a little while ago, so I feel like this will be our final language. But again, if anything comes up, any other issues we spot between now and that payment date, we're happy to come back and present it or send you an update through email. So any questions on the reinstatement language and or longevity pay?
Any?
You're very
Yeah.
excited. And I think we've actually held off a few resignations / retirements to get to that point, so it has been effective in retaining to some
Good.
degree.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Okay, we move now to item 4.10 from the Sheriff's Office, budget amendment for the purchase of console furniture for backup 911 center. Deputy Chief Tess Burchett has been, along with her associate, waiting
Yes.
very patiently to the very end of the agenda.
Yes, we're trying to figure out a way to change our name to A Sheriff's Office.
A Sheriff's Office.
Something to that effect. No, we don't mind being here. This is Lieutenant Travis McGee. He is the lieutenant of our communications center and our resident expert there. But yes, what I'm here this evening to ask you for is the budget amendment and the approval to purchase the backup 911 center that is, the state 911 board statutorily requires us to have a backup plan to move our 911 operations to. We are currently at the DHS, the old DHS facility that we call it, and we're moving to the Milestone building. And this furniture would allow us to have a fully operational backup 911 center at the Milestone. So the budget amendment, basically, the majority of the funds come from our 911 funds. Some of that, 85,000 of it, is basically monies we were budgeting to spend on backup batteries that keeps the center running before the generator kicks in. We're not needing to buy those this year. We can push that off to the following year. And then basically 6,000's coming from our furniture budget item line. So with that budget amendment, we'll be able to fully fund it. Any questions? Wonderful.
Do we have somebody else's backup center at
Rowan County.
Rowan County?
So it's like a reciprocal agreement. They can come and run out of
Yeah,
us.
so that will be at Milestone as well.
Correct, they'll move with us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, item 4.11 from Tax Administration, adoption of the Schedule of Values. And we're happy to have David Thrift back with us for that item for our third meeting in a row. Right?
Yes, sir. So tonight, I'm going to ask that you adopt our Schedule of Values, standards, and rules for our 2024 revaluation. As I presented these at your work session last month, we went through a lot of detail there. I won't do that again tonight. Just want to make note that these Schedule of Values is available on our website for anybody to view. It's also available as hard copy is in our office, and we're there to discuss and answer questions if anybody has any. So just as a matter of timing, we presented the Schedule of Values at the work session. At your regular meeting, we had a public hearing. Tonight, I'm going to ask for adoption of the schedule. We will then advertise for the next 4 weeks that the schedule has been adopted and is open to challenge if anybody wishes to do so to the Property Tax Commission. And if that is not challenged, it'll become final on November 1st. So I would ask if you are willing to suspend the rules this evening. And we would ask that you adopt the market schedule of values and then separately the present use value schedule of values so that we can address those two items separately. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, as I mentioned, this is the third meeting that we've talked about the Schedule of Values, and I think probably we went into more detail explaining to the public the appeals process and the public input process than maybe we have in years past. I know I've spoken to several outside groups and mentioned the revaluation process and the schedule and the fact that this was open for comment now. So how many inquiries or comments have you gotten from the public about it?
So I have not had anyone in person come to ask any questions directly, but I hear from our IT department that we've had over 200 hits on the website to review. So
look
that's
at it. Well, that's good.
At least look at it. We've had some activity there, so that's a positive.
Right. Yeah, very good. Does anyone else have questions or comments? Okay.
Move to suspend the rules.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And at this time, did you say we needed two motion or this one motion to adopt the 2024 Schedule of Values, Standards, and Rules for Market Value, and to adopt the 2024 Schedule of Values, Standards, and Rules for Present Use Value?
Right, as long as you separate those, I think that's fine in one motion, just to determine them separately adopted.
Okay,
That's confusing, I know.
That's
Two
motions. Two motions.
is,
Okay, so I would make the motion to adopt the 2024 Schedule of Values, Standards, and Rules for Market Value. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. I would further move to adopt the 2024 Schedule of Values, Standards, and Rules for Present Use Value. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that takes us now to the approval of the regular meeting agenda. You all have a copy of that before you. I do not think we have taken any action tonight that changes anything on that agenda. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda as presented. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session tonight. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session as authorized by North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 A3 and 4 for the discussion of pending litigation and economic development. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. We are now in closed session, but I'll make one exception. I've had one announcement that I wanted to make that I've forgotten. In front of me, I have an award. Was invited to a luncheon on Thursday of this week. The North Carolina Public Health Association had their annual convention for the entire state here in Cabarrus County at the Concord Convention Center and Embassy Suites. So they had about 600 people attending that conference, and our local Cabarrus Health Authority nominated this Board of Commissioners for the 2023 North Carolina Public Health Association Partners in Public Health Award, and specifically cited our efforts in the area of behavioral health. So it was my honor to receive this award at their awards luncheon on Thursday. And so I think we should all, congratulations to all the rest of you as well. I was very proud. There were also several other scholarships that were awarded to some Cabarrus Health Alliance employees from the association. So we were well represented there. So congratulations to everyone. And with that being said, we are now in closed session, and thank our audience for joining us both online and in person.